Welcome back to another episode of the Strongman Winner Circle podcast. Today we have a special for you, which is I'm calling it the Tyler Young special, and we're covering the off season. So we have Tyler Young, a great 105 kilo competitor, the leader, the owner of Great Ape Performance. I'm pretty sure I said that right. But Tyler, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So Tyler wants to kind of talk. A lot of it's kind of talking down to his clients and talking to other kind of related athletes about kind of off-season protocols and also a little bit about scheduling.
Right.
But we really want to be able to kind of show you guys kind of what we've learned in the past, but also we don't want you to make our same mistakes. So this is going to be our suggestions and what we think in terms of how to put on a good off season, but also how to really schedule and pick your battles going into the year.
Right. Well, kind of taking the ball from that. I've been discussing this with one of my clients, Jimmy Harris, for a couple of weeks, and I had actually planned to shoot a YouTube video about it today, as it was, because this is my first day off. But then I saw your post, where you unfortunately had to pull out of OSG due to these ongoing back trouble rather. And, I just thought it would kind of be a good opportunity for both of us to, discuss how we kind of prioritize or sometimes don't prioritize, off-season recovery and how we can, put the building blocks together. And, as another one, Nick O'Hare likes to say, like, if you widen the base, then the peak's going to be taller kind of deal. Sometimes, we get so caught up in chasing the next opportunity, whether it's, nationals or ASM or Clash or OSG, and they're stacked so close in together that, we forget we're going to have to be a functional human after that competition season. So that's kind of the gist of where we're going today.
Now, did Nick O'Hare take that slogan from you, or did you make that up?
No, I got it from him. That's full credit to him. Wider the base, higher the peak, or something like that. So.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah, he said that when I had him on. But yeah, it's a great saying. But yeah, keep going. Sorry to interrupt you, Tyler.
Oh no, that was it. I've spoke with Nick about this, privately. But again, I kind of wanted to bring it to you guys. Kind of the importance of lineating your goals. So laying out what your goals are going to be for the next season, and that doesn't necessarily have to be, a calendar year. It doesn't have to be any, like, for example, if your goal is to become a 105 kilo pro, then, short of a little bit of local competition experience, it doesn't serve you a whole lot to, do, maybe USS or whatever. And that's not to, squat on USS or anything. I'm a big fan of them. But if your goal is to be a Strongman Corporation pro, then, you need to be focusing on bringing your best package to nationals. Or if you get one of those at-large bids to go to ASM like Congdon did this year, and he ended up winning, his pro card. But if that's your goal, then, everything kind of needs to feed that goal. Same thing, for 90 kilos when I competed in USS at 90, my goal was to compete internationally. Well, if you place top 2 at nationals, they help pay for your ticket to go compete wherever in SCL. That was a big goal of mine. So I didn't really do any Strongman Corporation shows other than the local ones until I bumped up to 105. And it's the same kind of thing. If you're on that world's level, that top 5 to 10 guys, and, you want to make a big imprint at OSG, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good to be, West Georgia's 5th strongest deadlifter, 6 weeks ahead of the show. Like, everything that's going to delineate from your training is going to, kind of hold you back from what you're looking to accomplish.
I absolutely agree. So what do you think about, I know you talked about, for instance, being if you want to be a Strongman Corporation pro, you should be focusing on nationals and not look on the local competitions. But I'm always a proponent of getting that experience in.
For sure.
So, like, for instance, if let's just say it's year 1 for these athletes, I would say I would like to see them do a lot of local shows.
Yes.
Year 2, you could do some more local shows. You'd try to be shooting on the ones that potentially you could maybe win a few, or just place very well. And then if you get the opportunity to go to national, I think that there'll be a great experience. And then now, if you're in year 3, you feel that you have a pretty good sense of what the amateur scene looks like. Your weights are close to, not towards the top, but maybe the very top of the weight class, maybe you can shoot for that pro card. But I always say you almost have to still put in the work in between. But what I've kind of touched this in some other videos, where um, in a given year, sometimes you have, let's say, 4 or 5. Let's say if you do like 4 or 5 meets in a given year,
Mhm.
you usually have 1 or 2 A performances. Then
Mhm.
you have maybe 1 or 2 B pluses or B minuses, and then there's going to be a C, which is you go in there, you're getting experience. It wasn't your best day, but you're glad that you were there.
Right.
So you don't want to waste those A performance, especially when you're a year 3, year 4 type of strongman. You don't want to waste those A performances on local shows. That doesn't really matter. So I think it is kind of picking your battles. And I think you mentioned a little bit before, but I see people sometimes dedicate their of course either performances or their training or their competitions towards one federation. I think you should
Mhm.
use every federation to your advantage,
Yeah.
especially because it's the most opportunity for weight class strongman that
Mhm.
there ever's been. You should really kind of figure out which those shows kind of fit into your lineup. Sometimes, especially in the if you're just focusing on the US, focus on the ones that are close to you, but you could really do a good job in terms of prioritizing different events across the year.
Right. And to clarify, I didn't mean like, pledge your allegiance to Strongman Corporation or specifically USS. I meant, like you said, you're in that year 3, year 4. You're really pushing for that as your goal. It serves you little good to go, maybe to USS Nationals, like so close to another big show or, whatever it may be. You're going to kind of have to pick and choose once you get to the top, because going back to kind of what you said about your A plus performances, that's about the sweet spot that I like to say, is that 4 to 5 competitions a year kind of deal. um, and the best advice that I ever got in the sport came from Derek Stone, and an OG Kentucky 105 pro. I'd competed like 10 times in 12 months or something like that. This was like my second or third year. If there was a local show, USS Strongman Corporation, didn't matter, I was there. And he pulled me aside after he used to run the Refuge Classic over in Madisonville. He pulled me aside and he was like, do you want to be a participant in these competitions, or do you want to be a competitor? And I was like, well, what do you mean? He was like, well, you're participating in a lot of competitions, but you're holding yourself back from being an actual competitor because you're competing so frequently. You're not getting time to focus on the implements. You're not getting time to recover. You're not, I was competing every 3 or 4 weeks. So it was a lot back to back to back. And, I really took that home with me and, kind of turned it over in my head. And, he was absolutely right. I was just overextending myself. So once I kind of, reined myself back in, that I didn't need to compete in all those shows. And again, this isn't me, shitting on local shows or anything like that. Absolutely go. Absolutely, if it's your first couple years, that networking is super important. Supporting your local strongman community is absolutely important. I'm talking about, a couple years down the road. When you're looking to crack into that nationals, you're looking to come to Clash, you're looking to, do well at OSG, you can still go to those local shows, but judge, volunteer, do something. You don't have to keep breaking your body down, just to add another trophy to the pile or just to hang another medal on the wall. And I think that's kind of where a lot of people get caught up. I need to win, like I said, West Georgia's strongest deadlifter. I have to prioritize my training. I don't care if it's 4 weeks ahead of whatever. But so that's just kind of where I'm coming from.
Now, what year did you like? So, for instance, what year in your strongman career did you win your pro card?
How many years had I been competing?
Yeah, at that point.
It was 2021, so 6 years. I was 6 years in, and it was my second year at 105. 2020 Nationals in Alabama was my first big 105 show. Like I did local shows at 105, typically because there weren't any 90s, so they'd bump me, or 200s, so they'd bump me up. So then I came to 2020 Nationals, and then 21 is where before Dan chimes in, before where Dan beat me,
Mhm.
and I got second at nationals in Virginia.
All right, excellent. Because I was around. It was my 4th season. I like to
Mhm.
go by seasons just because it's you
Yeah.
got related to a sport, and I think that's something natural that people can really understand. So you have the season during the year. The postseason is October, November, like ASM and OSG, especially for us
Right.
weight class. So that's kind of where I normally kind of keep it. Um, so I would say, but prior to that, I was putting the kind of those building blocks in. So
Mhm.
we talk about a little bit in terms of scheduling. So I think it is good to get those amateur competitions, those competitions for experience, for overall growth. But there's going to be a time where you're going to prioritize one of those competitions. So
Right.
let me give you an example of 2014. So 2014 was
Okay.
my third season competing. I just came back from my first nationals. I took 10th. Um, and that's the year that Rob Kearney won nationals that year. James Deffenbach took third, and there were of course other kind of like notable guys in that scene.
Is that in
Uh,
Shreveport?
that no, that was Denison, Texas. So we were
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
so that was an interesting one. So the first time I ever been sunburned and froze to death in the same day. That was an interesting one. So prior to that, I went into a few different shows. So nationals was always the biggest goal. Um, but I did three shows. I did Massachusetts Strongest Man towards like in September. I actually went down to North Carolina Strongest Man because Lynn was a kind of upcoming promoter at the time, so he
Hmm.
always had a good show. Had great competition. I went over to Lightning Fitness. Matt Mills always threw a
Hmm.
great local show. So like
Yep.
if you want like great local talent, that was always the show to go to. And then my anecdote kind of it's funny, kind of a year before in 2013, this story. Um, there was a there was a guy that beat me, Rob, and Zach Hadge all in a contest. His name was Jeffrey Blyja. And he just came in. It was interesting events. We had like a bench press event, like an incline bench log event, and like another kind of like drag and push medley. So it was kind of unusual, but in that instance, was able to beat all three of us in that contest, which was I thought was kind of pretty crazy. But just
Yeah.
to show that there was a good local competition. So I ended up winning kind of those three shows, and then um, I would say that Massachusetts Strongest Man was a little bit more of a tune-up, but was still about 7, 8 weeks before nationals. So I still had plenty of time to get ready for the show. But I was going to put all my eggs in that basket in terms of be prior in the year, get like pretty much I'm in sales, so I'm gonna work more towards like getting all my getting the most commissions I can, so I have the most money. So when we talk about not only peaking as an athlete, but you got to peak as a person. So kind of
Right.
mentally, you got to be able to kind of reduce the different stressors in your life around competition. So a lot
Hmm.
of times that's preparation. So getting ahead of things. So working on if it's house projects, school projects, or certain things that you're not working on when you're actually trying to compete. If you're 2 or 3 weeks out from competition, especially if
Right.
that's going to be the competition that you're going to be really see how you rank against the best in the country. So I was doing those other competitions to get experience, try different events, but I was really going to peak for that last nationals, and that nationals led me to the Arnold Amateur the next year, and then following that, I got my pro card. So
Right.
in hindsight, it helped me kind of build to where I was today.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you remember how spaced out? I know you'd started with September, but how much time did you put between those three competitions leading?
Actually, I think it was August. Now I think about it, I think it was August, and then
Okay.
and then um, and then nationals was like sometime in October.
Oh,
So
so they were all stacked in there pretty close.
a little bit. So the first competition, North Carolina's was like February. Lightning Fitness
Oh, okay.
was in April, and then I had the summer. And then I think at the time, a lot of the events for um, the TPS show or the Massachusetts Strongest Man was in Coraline, and just it had the same events than national. So I thought that was
Yeah.
a pretty easy transition. So
Okay.
competing.
Yeah. I misunderstood. I thought you said you did them all in rapid succession, but no,
Oh,
that to me, like, especially as a coach, like looking at, February, April, August, and then October, that's about perfect. You know what I mean? Then you've got that, you know, big summer to where you can, recover from the first two shows and lay out, what weaknesses that you're going to work to address for nationals. Hopefully, depending on the federation, you may or may not have your nationals events until pretty close to time. Um, but you at least have something that you can be working for. So to me, like hearing that looks like a good training season to me. And then after that, you've got what 5 months until March, because you said you went from nationals to the Arnold Amateur, right? So
Yes,
you
sir.
had 5 months, and I don't typically like competing, like you mentioned, like with life stressors and stuff. I don't really like competing through the Christmas season just because, it's a stressful time, especially with a family. And I don't know about you, but I've never made it all the way through Christmas and thought, man, we had way too much money left over this year. So, I always, keep a little nest egg put back because you never know what's going to happen. So that's a big reason that you don't really see me compete in November, December. After those first couple years of OSG that I went. But so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. But that sounds like a good, season to me.
Another way I've done it in the season wise where so the year I won my pro card, I also lined up two competitions the weeks after
Hmm.
the week after the pro card. So the main goal was the pro card and everything else was gravy. So like I still pretty much did a full prep for the pro card and then hopped into the other competitions, and whatever happens. But the
Right.
main goal was the pro card. So I went to win my pro card. The week after I won an Olympic meet. The week after I won the heavyweight Massachusetts strongman meet.
Yeah.
So it was a nice succession, but the main objective was that one. So I still got my experience in, but I still peaked and trained for the pro card.
Now, question though, did you cut weight for all of those?
So no. So the first one I cut weight, second, and the next two were heavyweights
Right.
or
So
open.
that's a big part that people don't really think about, when they're stacking their season in like this. I have, Nick's a pretty big 90 and he cuts from, 215. So I don't mind him doing, more frequent shows. So he stays in the mode of, like a lot of his local shows, he competes at 220. So he's not doing those big cuts. Those aren't necessarily weighted the same, pun intended. I have a guy, over in Virginia that's made several cuts to 175 this year, from like 190. And finally, like before nationals, like we had a talk. I'm like, hey, this isn't going to go this way. Moving forward, you're going to have to be closer to your weight, because it got close to the end. He was just kind of suffering. And I was like, you're either going to have to be closer to your weight or you're going to have to, compete less and be a little bit more disciplined. And, he was receptive to that. But, that's another big role that, that competing can take on you. Like if you're constantly fluctuating your weight by 20 pounds, if you're cutting weight once a month, we're competing into our 20s and 30s, that's not really going to set us up for longevity. It was different when we were, teenagers and cutting for wrestling and stuff like that. Like, we have a little bit more, a little bit shorter recovery window. But add that in with, the creatine that people may add extra scoops in, like leading up to certain competitions and stuff like that. And you never know, like with all that weight loss and all that immediate weight gain, what kind of long term uh long term kind of stuff that's going to do to you. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind and something to think about.
I think so personally, just I had a plan, of course, to do America's Strongest Man, do World's
Mhm.
Strongest Man. But I did probably my most drastic weight cut that I successfully weight cutted and then
Mhm.
successfully competed. But I don't think I took into the effect of how much that weight cut was going to affect me in the coming weeks. And I think that's one of
Mhm.
the reasons that led to my injury. I think I was pretty jacked up after America's Strongest Man. I'm like,
Yep.
oh, I'm ready for Worlds. Like take like bring on everybody. So I came back a little too fast, maybe a little too reckless. And I think that's what kind of led to my injury. So like, for instance, normally my protocol is to take a week off, but I think I was back in the gym that Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I did a session Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. So for the most part, if I think I could have done it again, I would probably waited a week and then probably took a little more time because about 6 weeks in between 6 weeks between the competitions. I did pretty much the same thing I did last year. And there were 7 weeks between competition, between America's Strongest Man, between OSG. But I would say that coming into this year, I was much bigger. Probably, I think I was much stronger, but just really unable to kind of control all that kind of just really kind of wind that down and write a pretty program. And a lot of times you think what works in the past is going to continue working, but your body's always changing, more evolving. So since I am probably, I would say, a little stronger than I was last year, I'm probably going to be needing a little more recovery, a little more rest than I ever had needed.
Mhm.
So I should have probably taken that account, but it's a nice lesson that I need to learn um, before my next competitions.
For sure, for sure. So you said something. Do you usually take the full week off after competition? Is that what you were
That's
implying?
if I can. I thought like I
Yeah.
had like for instance, I wrote a conservative plan in terms of my programming, in terms more of the weights and all.
Hmm.
But I did not take an account because normally I should be okay by that Wednesday, Thursday, but
Yeah.
I didn't take account of the actual weight cut. So I was still, my body was still fried at that point,
Yeah.
which I didn't realize until I was actually training. And I just
Yeah.
continued to the plan. So I think probably a whole week would probably be good if you can. Sometimes
Yeah.
you need to get back
Usually,
into training.
usually with my clients, I have them go back the Wednesday after, but they squat and do like leg pump stuff on Wednesdays, and then Fridays typically I just call bro stuff, where you do like a bunch of chest, back, and triceps and make you feel real good about yourself and get your muscles all pumped up. And then typically I won't let them, like if they want to, then I'm not going to throw a fit about it. But typically I don't let them train that weekend, and then that following Monday is usually when we roll right back into, okay, what's our goal? Is it, off season prep? Is it general physical preparedness? Is it, what USS Nationals? Is it Clash? Whatever it is, we'll roll right into whatever's next.
Now, what do you like to do in the off season? So, I was watching a Mitch Hooper video,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, he's pretty wise for his young age. He's like 26, and
Right.
but he says your off season should look totally different than your in
For
training
sure.
for a
Yeah.
competition or just leading into a block for a competition. He was running. He was talking about swimming,
Yeah.
doing other exercises. But what are your normal protocols for the off season?
So I started doing this last year, I believe. I'd have to go back and check my training logs, but I do a lot of like dynamic, like alactic stuff. So I do a lot of jumps and throws, and like I don't even know that I've touched a barbell this week specifically. Most of it's just been kettlebell stuff, like so I'll have a couple pump days a week where I come in and I get the back moving and I get the chest moving, and then most of it's just like addressing weaknesses that I've seen throughout the year. So I'm really working on tightening up my I use the word tightening, there was probably a better word for that, but strengthening my obliques, because I'm still having a lot of pelvic tilt and stuff like that. There's a lot of one-handed farmers walks, specifically with kettlebells, so I'm having to brace that opposite side oblique. But yeah, if you looked at my training right now, like it's pretty unrecognizable for a strongman. I basically look like a chubby CrossFit athlete in here. Like I'm in here doing Tabatas on my assault bike, and most of my workout will be EMOM stuff because uh, you know I enjoy this stuff, but I don't enjoy it as much as trying 400-pound logs. So my attention span isn't quite there as much. So I have to keep moving and keep it going. So a bunch of kettlebell swings, goblet squats. Like again, I couldn't tell you the last time I've had a bar on my back to squat. It's been a few weeks since I've deadlifted, but I feel great. Everything. Oh, lost you there. Everything is feeling functional again. Everything feels like it's working together again, whereas it hasn't really felt like that for a while. So
Now, what do you recommend for your clients? So, of course, that's a little bit of what you've been doing for your own kind of protocols.
the same general stuff. It kind of depends on what their weaknesses are. So at this point, I consider my weaknesses more dysfunctions that I've ignored for a long time. So with them, especially if they came to me early enough, if I've been able to address those, biomechanical inefficiencies to, kind of put them on the right path, whereas I wasn't on the right path for a long time, then most of their off-season stuff is just going to look like, um, hypertrophy based powerlifting. Basically, like I follow the same relative sequence. Like it might start 10 by 2, and I have them work to a comfortable double or a heavy double, and that's going to be their training max moving forward. So then they'll go to an 8 by 4 week, which is a ton of volume, and then a 6 by 6 week, and then everything kind of rotates from there. So tons of volume, but it's at a low percentage. The the 6x6s are, in the 70 to 75% range of their 2 rep that they hit on week 1. So I don't let them redline too much. I don't let them out of, 3rd or 4th gear when they're training, but the real work is done. I think we've talked about this before, but I have a primary mover, a primary accessory. So on a squat day, it might be, good mornings, or if they're really prioritizing their deadlift, it might be concentric good mornings with the safety squat bar or something like that. So that's your bread and butter. Like, I still have them do the main movement just for efficiency and, general strength conditioning, if you will. But the primary accessory is really what's addressing what's going on. And then 2 hypertrophy based accessories. So, on a leg day, it might be leg extensions and leg curls, or if they're, if they have weak abductors, then, it might be good girls, bad girls, or whatever, if their gym has that machine, adductors. So again, it just kind of depends on the athlete. But, tons of volume. It's not really, it reminds me of the Windler boring but big. It's not that, but that's like you're doing the same relative stuff, for a lot of volume. So.
All right, interesting. I always, of course, I like all the hypertrophy movements. I always think that, for instance, if you just talk about kind of in the gym training, that for instance, a lot of unilateral work would be great. So, like for instance, like single leg press, single leg curls, your Bulgarian, your single leg deadlifts. Just adding those in, just because we have so much, for instance, events either on yokes or farmers that were planting with 1 foot and had to be strong in those positions. But I also think it's a good time, and something that I preach in my seminars, to kind of work on some barbell work. Working on like the speed of the barbell. If you're trying to learn a push jerk, power jerk, split jerk, those are the perfect times to actually implement that in, just because you're going to have the time. And if you can't split jerk a barbell, it's going to be very tough to split jerk a log, maybe an axle. So you got to start kind of with the basics. So I, of course, being a little bit of an Olympic background, that's when I would probably do the most barbell work, would be during that time frame, is in that off season leading in. I might personally go back to, once I start training again, I'm thinking maybe late December, early January, of getting into more, I have an Olympic day where I focus on clean and jerks, squats, and then like leg accessories, and that way. So again, I'm kind of building that speed, but also, when we think about cleans, you got to build up that hip movements, and your hips are probably going to be the strongest muscles in your body. And especially what's going to drive a lot of those weights, especially overhead pressing. So that's why I'm such a component of barbell stuff.
Right. And how many days do you like to train a week?
I like to train. I would train every day if I could, but I think I'm going to have to do 3 or 4 days a week, just because where I'm at. I remember when, let's say I was 23, 24, when I was visiting the Olympic weightlifting center, there was a guy named Vasily. Vasily was kind of like, he was a Russian coach, and he helped me a lot with my technique, but I would watch him lift, and he told me he only lifted 3 times a week, when I thought it was crazy. I'm like, how are you that jacked? You're only lifting 3 times a week. I'm lifting 5 or 6 times a week. But just once you get to a point, and I think now when I think about it, he's probably the same age now than I am now. Like same age back then I am now. That once you get to those heavy weights, you got to have to kind of tone it down a little bit, just because it's so intense. The workouts you're doing are so intense. But I'm thinking probably like a 3-day, 3 main lifts, and then like a light kind of accessory day, maybe doing like back and some other movements that I didn't catch up during the week. So I'm still playing. I still have plenty of time to plan.
Where I'm at. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was done, but that's where we're at, like 3 main lifts in a light day.
Generally. So I always prioritize, some sort of squat movement, unless I've got something going on, like some pelvis issues or whatever, but I always prioritize squat as one of my main lifts. But so like, if I'm a ways out from competition, then I'll do, the big 4. Like I'll have, a squat day, a press day, which is like, might be incline, might be bench, might be, whatever it may be, a deadlift day, and then, a bunch of back accessories, and then an overhead day. But as we start to like really, 10 weeks out ish, 8 weeks maybe, then I'll drop the bench day, and then everything else will taper down on the volume, and I'll start working in my events on event day. So farmers yoke, whatever the contest is going to call for. And then I'll start working them in. So I'll still be training 4 days a week, but it'll be 3 strength days. And I treat my events now as kind of more conditioning than I do heavy. Like I won't touch a heavy yoke until I absolutely have to.
Mm.
There for a while I would train really, really heavy farmers because that was a big limiting factor of me, but or limiting factor for me rather. But I think leading into Clash in Denver, I touched contest weight once or twice, maybe on farmers. The rest was all about moving fast because it was in medley. I knew I was good for the weight, so there was no need, for me to get in my head. What if I come in, I had a terrible day, had a lot of life stress, and I dropped contest weight halfway through, and then all of a sudden I'm, jockeying in my head of, oh, what's going on? So that was never, I would just rather train the speed aspect when I know I have the weight. So.
No, excellent. But of course, I do like that, especially not touching kind of competition weight. I was yelling at some of my other 105s when I was watching the training. Obviously, I told them after the fact of after America's Strongest Man, but they were touching 1,000-pound yokes
No.
before that, and you only have so many 1,000-pound yokes in me, or in any 105 kilo athlete. So you got to pick those times when you do
Yeah.
1,000-pound yokes wisely. And you know what, Jesse? I think Jesse's the only one that probably got away with it because he ended up winning the event. He beat me by like 0.2 of a seconds, but he's beat me on yoke before, so I think it was his to lose regardless. But Jesse, of course, was big enough and stagnant enough. But some of the other guys that touch 1,000 prior, of course, didn't end up doing as well. I can understand if you want to get some touches and feel how it is. I've done 1,000 pounds before. I knew how it felt. I didn't like
It
it.
sucks.
So if you're thinking 1,000 pounds was the heaviest that we had in the competition, I didn't go heavier than 870. So I didn't go up to, I'm on 87% was my.
Yeah, I wouldn't have probably because I looked, I didn't know exactly, if that wedding was actually going to go through. Obviously, I had to miss for my buddy's wedding, and the first one I talked him out of. So I looked at it, and I put a general plan together. If I had to throw a prep together, I wanted to kind of be a little bit prepared. And I think what I finally came up with was what I wasn't going to run anything heavier than about 800, but I was going to pick 1,000, set it back down, have them pull 200 pounds, and then I would go with 800 or something along those lines. That way I could get the stimulus of the initial pick, but I wasn't going to carry it. But I think that's what I'd come up with. But
yeah, that's clever.
Yeah. I'm not mad. I didn't have to prioritize that. So.
Now you were of course mentioning a little off air in terms of like we were talking a little bit before about like kind of stacking different competitions. So of course if you're cutting weight between those competitions, but also what we want to do at some point is to like limit the burnout. And burnout is kind of a real thing. And you don't think you're burnt out until after the fact, because you stop doing those kind of those extra lifts or those extra accessories that you need. You're just doing the kind of like the bare minimum just to kind of get by. So again, kind of prioritizing those competitions, we want to kind of lead towards burnout, but also kind of picking your battles. So I think probably one of my mistakes, I think I could have maybe got to a higher level in my early years if I quit partying and quit drinking on the weekends, quit going to clubs in Boston and shaking my fists in the air when there's a heavy beat drop and all. So I think I could have done a better job back then. But I was, as I got older, I knew I still wanted to kind of go out, but I started picking my battles. So I would go out like every other Saturday because I realized after a Strongman Saturday, I should just chill the fuck out because I really needed to just rest from those workouts. So I'm not sure if any of your clients are maybe doing too many other things outside of the gym that they shouldn't be doing, but a lot of times that can lead into a burnout, and you're not going to put 100% into that prep, even if you are stacking a lot of competitions together, or if you're focusing on that main competition for the year.
Well, and I feel like I send this specific message at least 5 times a week. Like your body doesn't really know the difference between life stimulus and training stimulus. So, if you're working 16-hour days or 18-hour days, or, your grandma's in the hospital or your dad's sick and you're having to take care of him, or whatever the case may be, like those are stressful situations that are causing extra stimulus on your body. And while I understand the need to get our little, 45-minute to hour and a half endorphin release in the gym, like, you kind of have to triage what your needs are as a human. So, we talked about, me training every day. Like I train 7 days a week, but I only lift 3 or 4 days a week. So I'll get up early and, I'll cut a little bit of sleep here and there. But, if my kids have the flu or if my wife is sick or I'm sick, like I'm not going to do that. Like I have to triage what is important. And that's the main thing. So I would rather have, my clients be bought in and want to be there at the gym 2 days a week, as opposed to them having to drag themselves there 6 days a week. Because if you're in the gym and you're thinking about your finances, you're thinking about work, you're thinking about, all this other shit that doesn't really matter for your, I mean, it matters to you, but it doesn't matter for your workout. It's not helping you, get through it. Then you're just kind of spinning your wheels, and it's easy to see, when your nervous system is just overworked, you come through and you hit, an 80% deadlift. And, if a fucking butterfly would have landed on it, you wouldn't have locked it out. Like just everything. I mean, we all have those days where just everything feels so heavy. And I think that's a lot of it is people aren't really able to compartmentalize their life stress and how it relates and how it kind of interchanges with their ability to train effectively.
It's true. But yeah, Tyler's that not is more than just a strongman coach. He's also a life coach when it comes to things. And I would think, yeah, balancing life is super important and figuring out kind of those priorities. Good example is, of course, I'm trying to figure out my schedule for next year. And of course, I'm getting married in June. So I would think that the few weeks before I get married, I got to be pretty busy. So I probably don't want to schedule anything maybe the month before, but then also the month after, thinking about the honeymoon and really, of course, starting the wedding or starting off the marriage in the right direction. So I'll probably take between May and July off, just focus on what's important. And then after that, then I can start thinking of course, kind of ramping up in the fall, where I think we do have a lot of competitions that kind of fall in that time span. But again, you got to figure out kind of what's important, but also picking your battles and working around different life factors. Cool. Yeah, we covered a lot. We've been busting a lot. Is there any topics that we missed out on?
I think that pretty well covers it. The only addendum that I'd like to kind of add, because Nick O'Hare and I argue about this constantly, but but this is gonna be a good thing. This isn't like me. This isn't a call out. But like if you train alone, like if you don't get the camaraderie of being able to train with a group, like if you're like in your garage in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, like Nick, it will absolutely benefit you to do those, local contests here and there, as long as there's enough time space between your big contests and those contests. Because being around the community and, like there are times throughout the year, and I think I've even been in your inbox about it, where I'm like, I'm ready to take kind of a back seat, just kind of watch what I built grow a little bit. And then I'm at a competition. I'm like, all right, full send. We're back in it. Let's get after it. So I think being in the community regularly is important to your growth as an athlete. And, and the networking is obviously going to help you as well. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
No, I believe it. And yeah, I think Nick, he commented on one of my other videos, but I think it's possible to do really well, to train alone and do really well, but just a little more difficult. It takes a certain type of human in order to really execute everything alone. I think now I have of course, the privilege of having like 3 different training crews around me to really be able to help me and then for me to help them in terms of supporting each other's training. So that's TPS, that's Titan Barbell, that's Top Strength Project, all within like 40 minutes away from me. So I'm very privileged to have a lot of great gyms. And then if I travel even further, there's Lightning Fitness, the Spindle. There's a million other kind of gyms. So Northeast is been, even though you don't really think about the Northeast or at least the Boston area or Connecticut as being like a little bit of a hub, but there's a lot of strong athletes. So we need to get Tyler Young up here at some point.
I was actually thinking about coming to Boston. I was thinking about it the other day, but I'll talk to you offline, and we'll figure something out. I'll come up there. I've never been.
Yeah, you can come and touch my wiener dog.
Either one, whatever.
But Tyler, yeah, of course, tell the listeners, of course, Tyler coaches many athletes, of course, in a few different strength sports. But yeah, if you want to tell them a little bit in terms of what you've been working on with your athletes and of course what's important.
Again,
Where they can find you.
Well, Instagram at Tyler Young Pro Shortman. My Facebook, obviously, I keep it popping on there as well. But more training stuff is going to always be posted to Instagram. If you're interested in coaching, or if you have a question about training methodologies or anything like that, or anything I've said in this podcast, email me. If you have a complaint about anything I said, email Camby, because I don't want to hear it. But in all seriousness, I'm open to feedback or whatever. If you think I'm off the mark, then absolutely, I'll be willing to entertain the discussion. I've got a bunch of athletes prepping for different things. I've got an ultra marathoner. I've got grapplers. I've got powerlifters. I've got strongmen. But the shift lately has just been focusing on longevity. I want them to be able to stay in the sport, for a while and not be, you look at the top of the 105 division. No offense to you here, obviously, Nick, but a lot of us are broken, like a lot. Like everybody's like, oh, my shoulder, my elbow, my back. Like there's a lot of back stuff going on right now. And I kind of want to prevent that from happening to the next generation. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this to begin with, because I see these people doing so many heavy shows back to back to back. And, the season leading into, when I got my pro card was like, Waco early September, ASM late September. And then, Nationals was like 2 weeks later. And then afterwards, I was just like, oh my God, like it was just a lot. You know what I mean? So hopefully we can try to prevent that. So, because it's going to make for a better sport, right? It's going to push us to do better and train smarter and do better, because these up and comers, these, Nick Hines and, Tyler Pruitt's and all these other people that are on the come up, they're hungry and they should be.
But you have a good point. So I think, you can work through different injuries, and you got to figure out if you're hurt or injured. That's the first
right
important. So
for
diagnosing, sure. But usually I don't recommend pushing through back injuries. So personally, this is my 4th episode. I have 4 episodes this year where I've kind of injured my back. So
yeah,
that's a lot, and that's could be concerning. But I think I'm gonna be able to bounce back. But it's just, if again, the goal is longevity, so it's not in the short term, but also like for instance, Chad Curran, who came second at OSU last year, he's dealing with some kind of back stuff. And then and of course I've seen other kind of my great teachers and predecessors like James Deffenbach. James, he won America's Strongest Man in 2017. I think he took a little bit of a break. I think he did start kind of working through some back stuff in 2018. 2019 was able to get his back pretty healthy. Took 3rd at America's Strongest Man. In 2021, he took 2020 he took 5th, but his back, he zeroed the deadlift because he hurt his back. And in 2021, he was right there, and he probably might potentially beat me if his back was feeling better, right? But it's one of those things where
21 ASM, he podiumed, right? He took second.
He took second, but of course his back was again a little achy. But it's one of those things where a lot of times that's kind of the back can be the last straw for strongman. Sean DeMarinis was the same thing. One of the reasons why he kind of slowed down on competing was his back. So back health is something that to not overlook.
And when I say longevity, don't misunderstand. I don't just mean in the sport of strongman. Like I have to be a human after the sport. Like I have to be able to play with my kids and pick them up. And strongman is a very small window of our life that we, until we're able to like pay our mom's houses off and stuff like that, it's still going to just be, fun for us. Like it's enjoyable, and I enjoy spending my time and doing all this. But until we're having these like huge paydays, like Camby is, then it's hard for me to justify breaking everything and not being able to really be with my kids the way I want to. So
speaking of paydays, I was so Trey Mitchell's got back on YouTube. He's been can go in back stuff, which is great because I think Trey should be putting himself out there because I think more people want to learn about what Trey's all about because he's such a great athlete. He
Right.
I think so. He won the Shaw Classic. He took second at the Rogue, and he's competing at America's Strongest Man, which
In
is
December.
a 25K purse for first prize. So he has a potential of making six figures in just competition fees alone, which is not too shabby.
Yeah,
So
not at all.
we like where the
Also,
sport's heading.
my thing just dinged. I've only got 5% battery left. Sorry, man. I was up with the baby all night. So
No worries. But
if I disappear, that's what it is.
It's a lot of fun. But I'm gonna have all Tyler's information below. So if you want to learn more about Tyler, if you want to hire Tyler as a coach, you can message him out, and of course you'll set up a consultation. But Tyler, thanks for coming on, and of course,
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, brother.
and we'll definitely talk soon.
Yes, sir.